All right, so welcome to our Back to School 2021 for elementary school parents. We are going to get started with our presentation portion. So I will pass it along to Julia Sakowski and Debbie Combs, who will be presenting some tips and techniques for us.
Right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Debbie Combs, and I am an early childhood mental health program coordinator for Syntero. And Julia, do you want to do a quick intro real quick?
Yeah, I'm Julia Sakowski. I'm a school-based clinician and I work in the Olentangy School District.
Yeah, so Julia and I are just going to go back and forth. And like Megan said, if you could just hold your questions, we're going to give you guys an opportunity in the breakout rooms to ask any questions that might be on your mind. Okay, so we are ready to go if you want to go with the first slide. All right, so back to school can be tough. This is an understatement. I think even in typical years, kids can feel really stressed and anxious about returning to school. With the pandemic, now we have kind of an additional layer of increased stress and anxiety and uncertainty surrounding kids in terms of what's it going to look like this year. Kids tend to get, in a normal year, kids worry about finding their classes and succeeding in school and making friends and who is their teacher going to be. And so what we're going to do in this presentation is talk about what that stress might look like in your kids and then give you some coping strategies that you can try to use at home.
All right, so similar to like Debbie said, there's lots of things that make back to school tough during a typical year, but this is a different year for sure. So we just want to highlight some of those special considerations. So students have definitely experienced some disruptions in the last year, to say the least. Perhaps they've had less contact with their friends or their peers. They've probably had less access to their teachers. And because of that, they've probably had weakened relationships with their teachers. And that's tricky for a lot of students. A lot of students thrive off of those relationships with their teachers. It's possible that they've had some restricted extracurricular activities. Maybe they haven't participated in any extracurricular activities, or maybe they were with some activities that they've done before, but they just look different. So they had to get used to that as well. And then additionally, there's been fewer school resources offered. And they might have seen that with lunches and supplies, but also things like field trips or guest speakers in the school. That's probably been different as well in the last school year and perhaps in the school year coming. It's also important for us to keep in mind that a lot of kids haven't been in a school building full time for over 18 months, and some students haven't been in a school building at all. And then additionally, students may be moving into different buildings just because they're moving up a grade. So there's something new there as well. And some students may be in the same building, but there'll be new staff there. So there's lots of adjustments to be considering.
All right, so some of the common signs of stress to look out for your kiddos. I kind of think of this in three different buckets. You have those physical symptoms where your kids might have headaches or stomach aches or like frequently complaining about different pains that they're having. You might notice some sleeping or eating changes. There could even be bedwetting or nightmares. Another bucket to kind of look out for are those emotional signs of stress, which might look like your kiddo is just maybe more emotional than they typically are. Maybe you're noticing that they're crying a lot more often, or they are constantly worrying. Maybe they're starting to really complain about having to go back to school, and just in general, they might be more irritable or moody. And then a third bucket to kind of look out for is behavioral signs. And so maybe you're noticing that they are extra clingy right now. Maybe they don't want to leave your side. Maybe they are avoiding certain things, which is kind of another classic symptom of anxiety. You might notice that they're being really aggressive or defiant, or just having emotional outbursts, or having like temper tantrums. So those are those things that you really want to pay attention to. As the parent, you are your child's expert. And so you know what your child's baseline is. You know what those typical behaviors and emotion and physical symptoms are. And so you're the best person to kind of look for, is my kiddo, am I seeing increased symptoms of stress in them?
All right, so what can parents do to help? Perhaps this is a question you're asking because you came to this presentation. So first we want to consider recognizing your own emotional reactions. Kids are very aware. They are very capable of picking up on the cues that the adults in their lives are putting out. So we suggest to be aware of your own responses and stress reactions, not only for your own well-being, just because your kids are also picking up on those. So those stress reactions might look like experiencing a shorter temper than usual, raising your voice when maybe you wouldn't usually, feeling hurried, or also being tearful. So first we would consider labeling your own feelings when you're experiencing them. And once you've been able to label that feeling, go ahead and model to your child what using a helping coping skill would look like. So maybe those coping skills are using mindfulness, deep breathing, or just taking a break. But those are all things that you can invite your child to do with you, and then to explain to them why you're using it and why it's helpful. Additionally, if it's possible to tap into your social resources, that might be helpful with those emotional reactions. So perhaps there are friends, family, or neighbors that can help with childcare or housework or yard work, those kind of things. Or maybe those people can just have a conversation with you and offer emotional support. Those would all be helpful.
All right, so asking your children what they think about going back to school. This might seem like a really simple statement, but at the elementary age, a lot of times kids have not quite figured out a way to express their own emotions. Maybe they're not even sure what it is that they're feeling. And so asking them what they think about going back to school can be a good way to kind of find that out with them. And so you want to use empathy and reflective listening in your questions and answers. So we want to make sure we're not too quick to jump in and fix the problems or concerns that they have, which is a really normal response for parents. But sometimes we just want to kind of pull out from our kids, what is it that they're actually feeling? And so maybe we are asking them questions like, how are you feeling about going back to school? What's something that you're really excited about for this school year? Maybe what's something that you're really nervous about for this school year? And then once we are able to get some of those answers from our kiddos, we might use phrases like, oh, that sounds really tough, or I hear your concern, or it sounds like you feel really worried because you're not sure where you've never been in this building before, or you haven't been to school for over a year now, and your friend group has completely changed. So I can understand why you are feeling a little bit worried about that. Go to the next slide. So affirm that there will be differences. If you're a parent who even has more than one child, you probably are well aware that even within your own family, your kids have different, they're going to be different reactions to how they are feeling. So people respond differently to stress. Some people, it's expressed through sadness or maybe anger or anxiety. And statements like everything's just going to be fine can be really invalidating to kids. And it really communicates that we don't understand or care about their feelings or fears. And really that everything will be fine, it might come from a place of just wanting to protect our kids. But sometimes they just need to be able to say the words like, I'm feeling really worried about this. And we don't necessarily have to solve that problem for them. But we also want to help our kids anticipate potential differences in the classroom. Most of our kids have probably already experienced masks in the classroom. I know for a lot of school districts where they're still kind of trying to figure out what that's going to look like for this upcoming year. We want them to know, what's this supposed to, what is the school telling our kids it's going to look like in terms of social distancing or class sizes, assigned seating. And so talking about those things in advance can really help to tamp down some of the fears and anxieties that they might be having.
Great. So we also have some healthy coping skills that could be used across a few different ages. And just for time's sake, I'll give a brief overview of all of these ones. And then if we have some time at the end, we can speak more specifically to strategies, or Debbie, we could even go through one if that's okay. So first, deep breathing, probably our go-to typically with little ones and with ourselves. Something I like to keep in mind when I'm teaching some deep breathing strategies to students is to make sure that we're breathing in through our nose, putting our hands on our bellies and filling up our bellies so that our hands move, and then breathing out through our mouth so that our hands move in our bellies. So it's an in and out feeling with your hands on your belly. Then using mindfulness and imagery is super helpful. Mindfulness is kind of a hot topic, so there's a lot of different things out there that you could do for mindfulness. But overall, if we're utilizing mindfulness, what that means is we are focusing on being present in the moment, and we're probably doing that in a quiet environment. Using imagery to do that is very helpful. Perhaps we're going outside and taking notice of how many birds go by, or maybe we're watching a video of some sort, and when the video is over, we're naming how many colors we saw. Something along those lines might be helpful. Progressive muscle relaxation is the act of tensing up our muscles and then releasing them so that the body gets to relax. When I do this with students, I like to go from toe to head, tensing up our toes and then releasing, and then going all the way up to the head and hitting those major body parts. You could also utilize a worry time. Depending on the age of your student, this could be from 5 minutes to 15 minutes, and it's a specific period of time. Maybe it's the same time every day towards the end of the day, where your student knows they get this period of time to think through the worries that they've had throughout the day and process them. And then after they've had that allotted time to think through those worries, maybe they have an activity at the end that is something that they enjoy doing, so that they're not just sitting with those worries throughout an entire day. Identifying and naming feelings. This is always helpful, and something we hit on earlier that you can be modeling and then also encouraging your student to do. And to help do that, you could use a feelings wheel or a feelings poster. These are great resources because they just give more options for how to explain what students are feeling. And sometimes that is not instinctual. And then lastly, the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. This is very helpful grounding technique where you move through the 5 senses in order to ground yourself. So you look for 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. And it does take a little chunk of time to go through all those to help ground your body. And lastly, it's helpful to practice these skills leading up into the school year and then throughout the school year as well.
All right, so creating a routine and sticking with it. Routines for kids are so important, and a lot of times the summers are, our routines are a lot looser and we don't have that consistent schedule. But it's really important, as you're getting ready for the school year, to create a routine to help kids know what to expect. A lot of times those anxious feelings come because our kids don't exactly know what is coming next. So routines really give them a sense of self-control and a sense of safety, which during the pandemic, our sense of control, our self-efficacy was really low for many of us because we just constantly had that feeling of not really knowing what was coming next. And so introducing a routine to your kids before the school year starts can be something that's really helpful. And I think probably most people are starting school within the next couple weeks. And so a few days before school starts, set that bedtime that you're going to have throughout the school year. Have that regular bedtime and that regular wake up time. Start that a few days ahead of time so that your kids are starting to get into that routine. They know what to expect so that that first day of school isn't quite so jarring. And they're already in that routine. But your routine, you can come up with a morning routine. Your kids wake up in the morning, they put on their clothes, they eat their breakfast, they have to get their backpack, and just kind of making that really consistent every day can really help your kids have a sense of control. Allowing your kids to make as many choices as reasonably appropriate is also something that can kind of help with that sense of control. So there's a couple of examples here. Would you like to get dressed before or after you eat breakfast? And especially if you have those kids who are, really hard to get out the door in the morning. This can, instead of constantly saying, all right, go brush your teeth or go get dressed, we're asking the question, do you want to get dressed before or after you eat breakfast? Then it feels a little bit more like they have more of a sense of agency about that decision. Would you like to take a bath right after dinner, or do you want to do it right before bed? And so as much as we can, it can be helpful to ask those questions. And if you have really young ones who just move really slow in the morning, you can even say something like, do you want to put your shoes on yourself, or do you want mom to help you get your shoes on? And that way you're creating that sense of independence in them. And they, a lot of times kids, when they're given the choice, they want to do it themselves.
All right, so emphasizing and encouraging the positive. So there are positive aspects about going back to school, and it's helpful to reach out to your kids and ask, what it is that they're excited about. I was in a group earlier this morning with some elementary students, perhaps yours, and they had lots of things that they were excited about as far as going back to school goes. A lot of them were aligning with this example of being with their friends and their teachers, and then participating in recess. So if we are talking about those things ahead of time, then maybe on days where it is tricky or we're experiencing more stress about going to school, we can remind them of those things that were exciting to them towards the beginning of the school year. And then also encouraging your child to participate in hobbies and interests is a great idea to help them have fun and relax. and improve their self-esteem. They may be tired after a day of school, of course, but their hobbies and interests could also be helpful to them to get a good mindset for the next day.
All right, so know when and how to seek additional support. So we talked a little bit about some of those signs and symptoms to look out for that really could indicate that your kiddos are feeling really anxious. If you are seeing really extreme emotional reactions for your child, if they're continuing for more than 2 weeks into the start of the school year, examples might be, that those anxious signs and symptoms, maybe they are really doing anything that they can to avoid going to school. You're seeing huge temper tantrums. If this is continuing after a couple weeks of school starting, that might be an indication that they could use a little additional support. You're going to see some different reactions when kids start school. That's pretty typical for kids to be more tired, to be grouchy when school first starts, and really even thinking about it in terms of, we are asking our kids to go from a really loose schedule to a very structured environment, and our kids hold it together all day long. And a lot of times by the time they come home, they are done holding it together. And a lot of times that's when you see those big reactions. You might see meltdowns and irritability and exhaustion. That's pretty typical for the first couple of weeks of school. If it continues beyond that, and you're still seeing some really big reactions in your kids, that is maybe a time to reach out for help. And also the assumption here is that we're trying to teach our kids some of these coping skills that Julia talked about in the previous slides. We're giving them some of those stress management skills, and those are also not helping. That would be when you could reach out to your school counselor or your child's pediatrician. Syntero has school clinicians in all of the schools in Delaware and Morrow County, and so that is also a resource for you.
All right. Thank you, Julia and Debbie. I'm going to stop our recording now.